So let me bring up the battle map again. And I want to ask you the other thing, as you were saying, if you take President Trump at his word, which I think is advisable, but also if you read between the lines, when he says he could have stopped this war or Zelensky could have prevented this war with very little loss of land. So I think what he's referring to there is the pink shaded areas on the battle map that, as we've said, for years now remain basically unchanged. So these are the separatist regions. There's a little more of the land bridge towards Odessa as a function of this war. Obviously, Crimea was invaded with very little fanfare back in 2014, which many believe was the original sin and kind of taught Putin the wrong lessons with respect to what he should do following the most recent Olympics with the invasion of Ukraine. But I think what we're seeing here is a negotiation would demand that first Ukraine accept the loss of the pink shaded regions here. Now, the question is, based on what you've said about who's actually funding the war at this point, is does the United States actually have any negotiating position at this point? Or would the EU and Ukraine, and already President Zelensky has said, look, I don't care that you force me to, or you're trying to force me to end this war. I'm going to defend my country in so long as I have a population that's willing to do so. So what if the United States sort of tries to create an outcome that the EU and Ukraine don't accept?
If you look at this from the Ukrainian government's position, or frankly Western partners other than the US, but particularly the Ukrainian government's position, they not only have just been stabbed in the back on multiple levels, first and foremost, the commencement of negotiations with their aggressor after 3 years of, whatever you think about the way the war started, whatever, utterly heroic defensive efforts at vast cost by the Ukrainians in terms of, individual tragedy, the number of people they've lost, the number of people wounded, 2 major cities completely flattened, and, a host of smaller towns and cities laid waste. To then have the US president turn around and say they shouldn't have started it is an astonishing betrayal.
And I'm not sure what that means, right?
Right.
No, I'm not sure what that means. Because does that mean that he should have just ceded the country when the threat of an invasion was present? I think that's kind of what he's saying. Or are they saying, look, this is the Azov Brigade, this is, the separatists, this is Nazis and the terror threat. You should have acknowledged that was the case and then allowed the Russian people to go to Russia and then all would have been okay. I'm not sure what he means in terms of placing the blame on President Zelensky.
Yeah, I think the basic idea is that he swallowed the very, very basic disinformation line that's been pushed by the Russians through InfoWars and all sorts of other stupid outlets for the whole course of the war, that basically there was some secret negotiation track that apparently Boris Johnson or Zelensky, or depends what version of the madness you hear, that they torpedoed and convinced Ukraine to keep fighting, which is transparently insane as a thing to believe. But unfortunately, this seems to be something that he has decided to take on board as some sort of truth, and notoriously difficult man to argue with once he decides that he's right on something. So you could see the Ukrainians' fear, but to then leaving aside some of the things he's said. Let's say you say don't take him at face value. It's all some sort of crazy Ivan negotiating position tactic. But then this contract that they presented Zelensky with and said he had an hour or two to sign for 50% of Ukraine's current and unknown future mineral resources. So first of all, this is a country that was never particularly well off to begin with, that's been completely devastated both physically and economically by 3 years of being subjected to a total war by its much bigger neighbor. And then the US demands, with no security guarantees attached, just we demand it for notional repayment of an amount that the US president kind of came up with on a piece of paper, a greater proportion of Ukraine's GDP than Germany was charged by the Treaty of Versailles as the aggressor who started and then lost the First World War, which crippled Germany for 20 years economically and resulted directly, by the way, in the Second World War in terms of creating the economic conditions there. There aren't really words to describe it. If you presented it in a film as a script or a book, it would be laughed out of the room as manifestly absurd and an incredibly lazy plot device that would never happen. But but this is real, so yeah. I mean, from the Ukrainian side, what else can they do but say we don't accept this?